welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality.
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more, how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I've got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor.
Hello, people of the place.
Lovingly like this. 37 minutes later.
I can't see myself.
You'll be able to see yourself soon. Just give it 7 seconds.
Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy, I guess.
Yeah, we're doing it. We're back in our home studio.
We've been on the road for a while, and then we got back, and then we had to work out some technical difficulties.
It's true.
We did a bunch of things, also turned everything off and turned it back on again.
So many times.
Not sure which thing did it.
Changed some menu settings, changed some cable configurations, did some updates. I don't even know what was wrong. But
Oh, it's on autofocus.
so that means it's going to be going
Yeah.
the whole, we'll just try not to move as much.
No, that's not going to work. Let me go from auto.
I think it's always on autofocus.
No.
No? You can fix it?
Yeah, there's a...
Without stopping the stream?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell people stuff.
We'll see. Okay, so we did... Oh, yeah, it is sort of wiggling everywhere any person moves. There's your face. Or your sleeve. So it's only going to get smoother and smoother from here, friends. We were on the road for a couple of weeks. I was gone for 3 weeks. Dark was gone for 2 weeks. And we did some interesting streams from...
Zoom out. Put your hand in there and see if it goes crazy. No, go forward to the camera.
It did a little, junk?
Just trying to do it.
Yeah.
I don't want it to.
Well, we might just have to deal with that for this show.
Auto. Focus.
Anybody that would be joining this conversation is probably not going to stick around very long.
No, it's fine. We're just building the folks.
We're building content.
Okay, I see the...
I don't think it's doing it. Oh, it is still doing it. Anyway, guys, we have a really exciting summer lined up for y'all and for us. It's exciting for us to be able to... did you fix it, my dear?
I'm going to.
Oh, okay. It's exciting for us to have all of these sweet folks coming in to talk with us on Post-Orthodoxy. I'm hoping that we will be having these people in studio with a whole new camera setup. We're just going to shake things up every couple of months to keep it fresh. So what we have, the way that the show is structured right now is we have a live stream conversation with you all Mondays, and we just kind of range around a particular topic and see what your thoughts are on it and share sources with each other. And then Thursdays, we bring in a guest, either via Zoom or right here in the studio is the hope. Fingers crossed, all of that equipment works. It's probably going to mean the acquisition of several more HDMI cords. And then if you go to if you do that and it cuts out the video, I guess I'll just keep talking.
See what happens.
Okay, Sam Thompson is hanging out.
Is it working?
The video is still going.
Oh, good.
So go ahead and wang jangle your settings
to
your heart's content. And so what we've got tonight, we're going to talk about the concept of benevolent dictators, just to kind of fill out this week and start next week fresh with a new topic and a new guest. We just got into town back home in Butte in the wee hours of the morning on Wednesday, and wild and crazy things happened with my equipment while I was gone, apparently. And so now that's why we're starting our show 40 minutes late today for you. We appreciate you joining us anyway. And then on Monday, in celebration of Pride Month, in the U.S., I don't know if it's international, but we're going to talk about basically my experience of LGBTQ plus and Dark's experience of LGBTQ plus and your experience of the community or in the community. This is a very sensitive subject for a lot of people, and I know that I still have a ton to learn about gender identity, sexual orientation, romantic inclinations, and what's the fourth one? Gender expression. For instance, just because you identify as a woman does not mean that you have a gender expression that is femme or feminine. You might identify as a woman but prefer to dress, I don't know what the opposite of femme is, masc. Might prefer to dress in more masculine clothing. And just because you identify as a woman as your gender and you prefer to dress masculinely does not mean that your sexual orientation is necessarily towards the same-sex people or opposite-sex people. So that's the third category, is what your sexual orientation is. And then there's your romantic inclinations, which can be altogether different from your sexual orientation. I think that's been one of the most fascinating things for me about learning about, I should see if it's still wiggling, about learning about it's still going kachuk, the LGBTQ plus community over the past few years, is that at least in the West, in the mainstream, in the US in the mainstream, as far as my experience has been, we associate your sexual orientation or expression or desires with your romantic orientation or expression or desires. And those two things are not necessarily the same thing. So that's been a lot of fun. If you'd like to know more about those things, you can look up the Gender Unicorn. It's a really great infographic. I think it comes out of the Trevor Project, which is a group dedicated to helping LGBTQ plus, assisting LGBTQ plus youth in surviving the difficulties of being LGBTQ plus youth, potentially in a community that does not support you. And they have an LGBTQ plus focused hotline and chat hotline, which I think is really great, because a lot of times when people are at their lowest, they don't really actually want to talk to a stranger on the phone, and having a text service or a chat interface is a lot more accessible for somebody who's having a hard time. So you can look up the Gender Unicorn for more about that. So we're going to be talking around that subject on Monday, and then on Thursday we have the distinct honor of having Samantha Brown as our guest, and I'm not sure yet if I'll have my equipment set up in studio to host her in studio, or if she'll be joining us via Zoom. But either way, what's wrong?
I didn't fix it.
You didn't?
No.
Oh, we'll cheers for you anyway, and everybody will just have to not get nauseated. Samantha Brown joined us.
Oh, hi.
On a few episodes of Copacetic Conversations when we were doing that show with Mokai, and she was willing to discuss her life in the LGBTQ plus community. She's been involved in LGBTQ plus rights for many decades and has fought the good fight in a variety of arenas, socially and politically, and is willing to come and talk with us and be educational and share her life and her experiences, which I'm really, really excited about. So that's what we've got coming up next week. Did you want to say anything? Like, we can do our disclaimer, and then I can go on with what we've got coming up in the rest of the season?
Sure. We have to do our content warning and our viewer discretion. You, the viewer, should be discreet in what you view for the sake of your brain and your emotional state.
Yes.
I'm going to read from this thing. It says, the opinions and views expressed on this program are subject to change. Future Dark and Ainsley may not agree with present or past Dark and Ainsley, and that's kind of the point of the show. So if you are a diehard partisan, if you are convinced you already know everything, and there's no need to change your mind about anything ever, this may not be the show for you. This is definitely not the show for you. We do the opposite of that. We're always exploring our belief systems, our perspectives, social dogmas, political dogmas, sexual dogmas, blah, blah, blah. So we don't always agree with what we said last week, and we may not agree with... I definitely don't agree with what I'm saying in the future.
And on top of that, you might find some of the things that we talk about alarming, enraging.
Only if you keep watching, so just be aware.
just be aware we specifically talk about sensitive subjects. We talk about sacred cows and how you're not supposed to use the phrase sacred cows anymore. And
that's culturally insensitive.
Specifically dabbling in the borderlands of belief systems in order to get to know the human experience more broadly and be sure that we are exercising cognitive liberty with our own minds. So not everybody wants to do that. You could call it a kink. Some people really just want to know what's going on or feel as though they know what's going on. And any threat to the idea that I know what's going on feels like a threat. Any suggestion that I might not know everything that's going on can feel like a threat. And
maybe I'm wrong, which means everything I know is wrong and all my friends are wrong and I can't do that thing. Otherwise, I'll be alone in the wilds of information.
So if that's not something that you have room in your pie chart of energy to take on, this might not be the show for you.
Yeah, you can go watch MSNBC or Fox.
No, there's no need to be derogatory about it.
I'm not. I'm just saying MSNBC and Fox will just tell you the stuff you already know is
that's true.
Yeah.
They'll just tell you things you already know is true. And they're very mainstream in the things they discuss and how they discuss them, and we are not. And that can be alarming if you like the feeling of knowing what's going on. We specifically get off on the feeling of finding out that we didn't know what was going on, and there's more to be explored and learned about.
Yeah, I really like our little fade in and out thing. It's going to keep people focused. Like every video has its own, apparently every program has its own technical difficulties.
Also, for some reason, our chat text is extremely tiny today. So I don't know why.
Zoom in, folks.
I think
cozy up and get close to the screen.
My goodness. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
We've been gone for a few weeks and we're just putting everything back together, and apparently some settings got changed.
And sometimes you don't know what needs to be refixed until you start the video and you're like, oh shit, look at that.
We have to do that now.
Yeah. Sam Thompson says, put that in your pie chart and smoke it.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So
disclaimer down. Do you want me to go through the rest of what we've got coming up in this month?
Yes.
What I've got planned in advance?
Yeah, tell us what we have planned.
Okay. So next, after next week, which is our homage to Pride Month and the show and conversation with LGBTQ plus emeritus. I don't even know if that's the right word. Samantha Brown. We're going to be having a conversation in 2 weeks on the 14th of June about cryptocurrency. And more broadly, we're going to start off with a conversation about economics and how we do money these days, money and investing, and whether or not we should keep doing it that way. Dark's going to largely educate me on how finance works globally. Just kind of do a recap and then dive into this new financial thing rising onto the scene called cryptocurrency. And then on Thursday of that week, on the 17th of June, we have Damon Taylor coming in via Zoom. I'm not sure if he'll be joining us from the Midwest or from Georgia or from parts unknown, but he's been researching cryptocurrency for several months now and is going to give us the download on what he's learned, because it's beginning to kind of be one of those things where I know I will feel dumb if I don't get involved in cryptocurrency. Like 5 years from now, I'm going to look back at past Ainsley and be like, you dumb shit. Why did you not get involved? It's too late now.
Yeah, well, I
should have gotten involved before it was cool. And then also I'm getting to the point where the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, if I don't tell everyone about this, then I'll feel like an asshole.
In 2009, I said, oh, that's probably going to be a thing. And then it was a thing.
And then what if you just put $100 in 2009?
I would be doing all right.
You'd be really rich right now. There's probably a cryptocurrency calculator out there for the really depressive people to be like, if I had invested in 2009, how much money would I have now?
My roommate was a math geek and a gamer, and he was broke and depressed and living in a room, darkened windows in the middle of Hawaii, just gambling and learning about cryptocurrency. I don't know where he is now.
Maybe he's a billionaire.
He could be a billionaire at this point. But he was there mining tokens in my room.
Oh my goodness! And that's a whole other side of cryptocurrency. Right.
Yeah, that seemed like too much work.
There's the investing side, and then there's the
mining side,
trading side, and then there's the mining side. I wonder how long the batteries in my battery-powered keyboard will last. All right.
That's a good question.
They just might give out in the middle of a show one day where they're like running around trying to find batteries. All right. Drago says it's never too late to invest in crypto. I appreciate you, Drago, and we hope that you join us sometime in the third week of June and share what you've learned about cryptocurrency. Yeah. I'm basically going to go through Facebook and search for any friends that have ever made a post about cryptocurrency and be like, y'all join.
So it's going to be a good show. We're going to make ourselves an experiment. We're going to throw down X amount and then we're going to check in every month and see what happened.
Yeah. And we've got a couple of other experts in the field lined up to check back in with us about the crypto thing over the next couple of months.
And we're talking about crypto because the name of the show is Post-Orthodoxy. We started off talking about orthodoxies of religion and politics, and we would like to talk about other orthodoxies,
even
such
broader.
as economic orthodoxies. The central bank is bound and determined to remain relevant. And so I think we're watching an epic battle between a new currency and the old guard financially. And it's going to turn some things around. I don't think it's not going away. So we want to be a part of that story, follow that story.
Yeah.
And you can follow the story with us. And if you know more than us, please, that's the whole point of this show. We're trying to get smarter on some subjects. So if you know more about crypto than we do, please join the shows. Comment on the shows, email us privately with your special tips.
No.
Yes.
And which we will then share with our audience.
Yeah, because we're kind of that way.
And then the third week that I have lined up for us this summer is 6/21. We're going to do, last season we did a 2-part series on the drug wars in the U.S. and drug scheduling and a lot of the brainwashing surrounding various substances you are or are not allowed to put into your body in the U.S. We're going to dive back into that and kind of do an overview. And then on 6/24, we have Her Royal Canna Chef herself coming in from Central Montana. She's going to be speaking with us about her experience pre and post-hibition. And she is the sort of person who is not only a personal champion for the legalization of cannabis, but she's also developed recipes for things such as cotton candy cannabis or cannabis cotton candy. What are you doing? I can't take it. I can't run the whole show myself.
You're doing a great job.
Somebody say something.
Here, I'm going to try this little. Is that focus? That's the Zoom. Where's my focus even?
Okay. I don't think it's as bad as you feel like it is.
I feel like it's bad.
So those are the next 3 weeks, and it's really nice to have shows lined up a few weeks out. We also are hoping eventually... Did you do it? Nope. We're hoping eventually to have a conversation with Tony Connors, talk about art, Jackson Pollock, the FBI or CIA, and commerce, and the intersection of art and commerce, and how people who just want to do art have to also care about commerce, and people who care about commerce somehow get involved in art. And maybe we'll even discuss my newly found phobia of arts groups. I can't imagine where that would come from.
No, just look at the screen. Do you look focused?
I suppose so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, maybe that will do it.
Okay, get your butt back over here. We've got stuff to talk about.
I care.
Okay. All right. So that's my recap. I have a couple people that I've messaged about the last week in June, so we don't have a topic for the last week in June yet. Waiting to hear back from them on their availability.
Did want to talk to our Russian friend.
Oh, right. We have a Russian correspondent lined up to be like, what the heck is going on in Russia?
What the hell is going on in Russia?
I'll put that in my notes right now.
Yep. By the way, I did some research today. Oh, it's still doing the thing.
You have to just not look at it then.
Okay.
Because we have to do good content.
We have to go on with the show.
We have to go on with the show.
This will be an audio podcast later, and nobody will know. So, yes, I went off a little bit today. I went down a rabbit hole, like I like to do before the show, to find out things and see if I can share them with the audience, and then maybe they can help me refine my information. But mainly what I have is a bit of a declaration and rant.
Yeah, we had some things, back when we were on KBMF, we were very our conversations revolved around politics and religion a lot, because those are probably the two biggest camps of things people have strong opinions about. And for me, I have been working on deconstructing my experience of religion over the past several years. So that's the main thing for me to talk about with people. And Dark is constantly, or used to be, more heavily involved pre the 2020 election, kind of more heavily involved in trying to help our fellow citizens deconstruct their attachment to the two mainstream political parties in the U.S. And find a way for us to be more productive with our political behavior in this country. And you used to have some things that you would just say all the time as reminders, sort of like Bernie Sanders, just kind of repeated the same 4 things all the time, and it eventually became something the mainstream news had to start talking about.
Right. So hold on, I'm trying to find, I have to go back to the Post-Orthodoxy video here. Yes, I thought maybe before we launched into that.
Oh, I was just prefacing it because you brought it up.
Okay, we'll do that, and we'll get in. I want to talk about the colonial pipeline in a little bit. We'll
you
get to that later.
just started saying you were going to do your political shindig, and then I set it up for you, and now we're not going to go like...
Here we go. All right, we're going to go down. I went down. So there's a thing that we used to talk about at the beginning of every show of Post-Orthodoxy in the previous incarnation of our show when we were a radio show. And the basic premise was, because it was 2016, it was an election year, people were relentlessly unfriending people left and right who did not agree with their particular partisan political perspective.
Oh, you said one of the wrong things. Bye.
What?
That's what people would do to each other online.
Yeah, right. You said the thing, so goodbye forever. And so, like, families were getting ripped apart. We got kicked out of KBMF, I think, not purely, but largely because of political bias and unfortunate partisanship that is devoid of what the fourth estate is supposed to be. If you're doing journalism, you should be able to question power, question corporate overreach, question the church. You should be, that's the whole point of the First Amendment, is being able to question. So during an election year, I thought it was important to say at the beginning of every show that we do not live in a democracy. We live in a political, we live in an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery, according to Jimmy Carter, ex-president.
That a lot of people like.
Now a tiny man, apparently. He's becoming a leprechaun and transitioning into another realm,
so
apparently. But yeah, we're all fighting each other over this premise of the stuff that we were taught in public school about who America is and how we do business.
America.
So I wanted to read a couple of things. There was, I think I got some of these things out of order.
In your notes?
In my notes. I want to talk about oligarchs because Jimmy Carter. But the general idea is, I have a link to, where's the Wikipedia link? I have a Wikipedia link to the page. Oh, geez, I lost that too. We're having so many technical difficulties.
It's a special day. It's a welcome back home day. Nobody's paying us to do this shit yet.
Right.
We're working out all of the kinks before people start paying us to do investigative journalism.
Right. So I was looking up oligarchy. You know, Russia is officially an oligarchy.
They're not lying about it. They're not like pretending they're a democracy.
They've been an oligarchy since 1914, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, if you're rich, you have to be in communication with the government. That's how it works.
Okay.
And then you get to continue to stay rich, I guess. I'm not sure how. That's why we're going to find out what the hell's going on in Russia.
Yeah, because in the U.S., it's kind of like if you're a government, you have to be in communication with the rich, and then you get to stay a government. That's how the U.S. is.
Right. So the thing with the oligarchy, so I looked up oligarchy. Small group of people having control of a country, organization, or institution. I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
Some contemporary authors have characterized current conditions. This is from Wikipedia on oligarchy. Some contemporary authors have characterized current conditions in the United States as oligarchic in nature. Simon Johnson wrote that the, quote, The reemergence of an American financial oligarchy is quite recent, unquote, a structure which he delineated as being the most advanced in the world. Jeffrey A. Winters wrote that oligarchy and democracy operate within a single system, and American politics is a daily display of their interplay. The top 1% of the U.S. population by wealth in 2007 had a larger share of total income than any time since 1928. In 2011, according to PolitiFact and others, the top 400 wealthiest Americans have more wealth than half of all Americans combined. This is what Bernie Sanders ran on, was this whole income inequality thing. Did you fix it? Whatever. I'm going to go further.
I'm a Ute.
This is I looked at all,
I know how to Google search.
We're going to go back to it. We're going to fight later.
Fight!
In 1998, Bob Herbert of the New York Times referred to modern American plutocrats as the donor class. This is 1998. The donor class has now become a phrase that people use as sort of code for oligarchy.
Right. The donor class. Right. You have a fancy dinner, they give you money, and then you make things happen politically that they want to make happen.
Right. The donor class is defined as a tiny group, just 1/4 of 1% of the population, and it's not representative of the rest of the nation, but its money buys plenty of access. And then this is really important. This is in the Represent Us website.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to share that video. Such a good video.
Where they're quoting this information, but Jennifer Lawrence says it, and she's a movie star, so you know that you should listen to her. But what she's quoting is coming from a 2014 study by political scientist Martin Gillens of Princeton University and Benjamin Page of Northwestern University. And they stated that majorities of the American public actually have little influence over the policies of our government that our government adopts. The study analyzed nearly 1,800 policies enacted by the U.S. government between 1981 and 2002 and compared them to the expressed preferences of the American public as opposed to wealthy Americans and large special interest groups. It found that wealthy individuals and organizations representing business interests have substantial political influence, while average citizens and mass-based interest groups have little to none. Now, that's between 81 and 2002, and that's before the unlimited political bribery of Citizens United was passed.
That was even before Citizens United.
That was before Citizens United.
Oh, my Lord.
So I'll do one more thing here. Benevolent. Let's talk about, and then we'll leave that part there about the U.S. being an oligarchy. More and more academics are looking at the U.S. and saying, "Well, yeah."
I mean, if you actually just look at how the politics in
how
the
does
U.S.
it work?
If you actually look at what you could know about how politics actually work in the U.S., then you would define the U.S. as an oligarchy, not as a democracy or even a democratic republic.
We're none of those things.
We are not functioning as a democracy or as a democratic republic.
Right. So I've been kicking around the idea of benevolent dictatorship.
Yeah.
That's starting to sound better and better.
If we look
actually
back, the example that we keep going back to is the Crying Indian campaign, which...
Right. If the EPA, by the way, a Richard Nixon administration victory.
Oh.
Richard Nixon, under Richard Nixon, the EPA was created. When the Cuyahoga River caught on fire, they decided maybe we should do stuff about the environment. Maybe we have some responsibility to do stuff. And so that's the idea of big government,
right, trying
to mess with corporations. But literally, rivers were catching on fire.
Yeah.
So they're like, we got to do something, right? So the Crying Indian campaign came out.
It's like
and
benevolent brainwashing.
Which was actually an Italian, Iron Eyes Cody, actor playing Native American. That's what acting is. So anyway, he's acting like a Native American, and he roams around. He goes from the pristine wilderness in his canoe into this log jam of McDonald's styrofoam clamshells in the river, and then he's walking down the street, and somebody throws their fast food at him. And suddenly, an entire nation was guilt-tripped into stop throwing their stuff out the window.
Right.
Now, that's not a dictatorship.
Now, they have been trying to explain rationally why people shouldn't
Don't do that, right.
for years. They had been trying to, like, rationally. This is why maybe our entire show will just tank, because we're constantly trying to have rational conversations.
Oh, I'll get emotional as we go. That's what I'm realizing. The more emotional pleas you make, the more people get involved.
Right. So the Crying Indian was an emotional campaign, total emotional brainwashing, where reason had not had any foothold.
Not enough. So as a kid, I watched that and I was like, geez, my dad's a jerk. Because my dad was one of those guys throwing McDonald's out the window.
Little did you know.
We would drive down the road. He didn't want that stuff getting in the car, so we would just throw it into a ditch somewhere around Atlanta when we were driving down the road. And as a kid, I was like, hey, my dad's kind of a jerk because that Indian cries about this stuff, and I don't want to make the Indian cry. So it had a powerful effect on me and apparently a lot of other people.
Right.
And I think part of it was generational. So that's the idea of like that we democratically elected people who then did something, the EPA, and then there was an ad campaign which bolstered the EPA, and then we had change.
Yeah.
But apparently, according to this thing, since 1981, we can't do that anymore. Not according to our normal electoral processes. Our normal elections are not getting us people that then enact things that we want them to do. That hasn't been happening at least since 1981, apparently.
Yeah.
Little to none, according to the smart guys in Princeton and Northwestern University.
So this Princeton study that he's referencing, for those of you just joining, is saying if we look at all of the policies the American public says that they want, and we look at all of the policies that have actually been enacted, they don't match.
Right.
The policies that have been enacted match the interests of small financial groups in the U.S. and not the interests of the general American public in this Princeton study.
That seems to be the story.
Do you have a link to that Princeton study?
That is in the Wikipedia article under oligarchy.
Dot Connector joining us on YouTube says USA has corporate fascism.
That's pretty valid. That works.
So as
a definition,
the corporations make stuff happen. Yeah.
So I started looking up benevolent dictatorship. We've talked about anarchy. We've had a couple of shows talking about anarchy, and people think of anarchy as where people's hair's on fire and they just run around screaming, but it's actually a political philosophy,
right? Where
you say the system's broken, and we have to crowdsource a solution. And it's usually a temporary thing.
Anarchy is a temporary state.
Is a temporary state where you say the old business broke and we're going to restructure.
Yep.
And that's anarchy. But that's not people running around screaming. That's people saying, who handles this resource? Who can do crowd control? Who can manage the food issue?
Who's got a generator?
And then people start crowdsourcing that stuff. And then that tends to be what humans do.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Yeah, I've been in big disaster areas, and I've been to places where I guess you would say it was by definition anarchic conditions.
Yeah,
and it was calm, cool, collected people from the inside coming out saying, "How can we be a part of the solution? How do we get to? I'll fold up chairs. Whatever you need me to do, I want to be a part of the thing." So that's anarchy. So the idea of the benevolent dictator, I thought I would look up a benevolent dictator and see
what Google said about it.
See what maybe a notable benevolent dictator in history.
Do you want to know something interesting? I Googled anarchy to see what the definition was.
What
and
Google
the
say?
Very first definition of anarchy is a state of disorder due to absence or non-recognition of authority, synonymous with lawlessness.
So which came first, the lawlessness or the anarchy?
The second definition of anarchy is the absence of, so they just switch it around and put it in a completely different light by switching it around. They say anarchy is the absence of government and absolute freedom of the individual regarded as a political ideal.
Okay, so it's the same thing with literal...
Depending on whose perspective you're looking at it from.
and figurative, they now mean the same thing.
Right.
So, benevolent dictatorships. I'm going to do some priming on what a benevolent dictatorship is according to Wikipedia. A benevolent dictatorship is a government in which an authoritarian leader exercises absolute political power over the state, but is perceived to do so with regard for benefit of the population as a whole, standing in contrast to the decidedly malevolent stereotype of a dictator who focuses on their supporters and self-interests. Focuses on their supporters and self-interests instead of the general good. That sounds like the Democrats and the Republican parties.
As in,
they focus on
the politicians who are Democrats and the politicians who are Republicans. We are not speaking of the citizen voters.
We're talking about the dictators in those parties.
Right.
Because it seems like they're a little more malevolent because they're not, it's become hip to hate the other side.
Yeah.
So that's no longer benevolent, according to the dictionary anyway. A benevolent dictator may allow for some civil liberties or democratic decision-making to exist, such as through public referendums or elected representatives with limited power, and often makes preparations for a transition to genuine democracy during or after their term. It might be seen as a republican form of enlightened despotism. And of course, in Wikipedia, you can just click on enlightened despotism and go down that rabbit hole. Further, it says modern usage of the term in a world society where the norm leans much more towards democracy can be traced back to John Stuart Mill in his classic On Liberty, 1869. Although he argued in favor of democratic rights for individuals, he did make an exception for what he called today's developing countries. Now, this is where the term benevolent dictator has its roots in colonialism, which I think is really interesting.
Oh.
We may have, and this is his quote. This is that guy, Stuart Mill, on Liberty. We may leave out of consideration those backward states of society in which the race itself may be considered as in its nonage.
What?
Nonage. This is 1869. Despotism is legitimate in dealing with barbarians, provided the end be their improvement. Liberty has no application to any state of things anterior to the time when mankind have become capable of being improved by free and equal discussion.
So can you walk that one through with me, what you think it means?
Yeah, he's saying democracy should be the law, but benevolent dictators come in handy when you're dealing with savages.
Ooh.
So, and it goes, there's another to this.
And we are the savages?
Well, benevolent dictator was also a popular rhetoric in the early 20th century as a support for colonial rulings. A British colonial official called Lord Haley said in the 1940s, quote, "A new conception of our relationship may emerge as a part of our movement for the betterment of the backwards peoples of the world."
Rude.
Haley conceived economic development as a justification for colonial power.
Wow.
So in the past, it seems like the idea of a benevolent dictator is a way to rationalize colonialism. But now...
That because, so to put it in modern terms, because
Yeah.
people are stupid, somebody should just tell them what to do.
Come in and tell them what to do. Unfortunately,
That
I
is
feel like...
kind of the argument I hear against direct democracy.
Right.
And unfortunately,
we-
it comes from the liberals.
Yeah. Well, after watching politics for most of my adult life, I'm afraid that we have, in America, become the savages. We have become the people who are incapable of actually having a conversation about the whole. The idea of the left was to be, let's take care of everybody. And the idea of the right was, you just got to take care of yourself.
And your family.
But now the left has decided that we, America, are the Democrats and the Republicans are not. The Republicans need to be ridiculed, unfriended, ignored. And unfortunately, that makes them that which they fight, which is partisan to the point where they have left out the whole of the nation. And so they can no longer be a benevolent Democratic Party because they are really only dealing with issues of the city.
There was kind of this idea for a while that, and I mean, I think I even had this idea when I was growing up a Republican conservative, was that the Democrats are like really lovey and precious, and that wouldn't be a problem except that they were trying to tell everybody else what to do.
Right.
And so even growing up, I had this concept of the Democrats as the benevolent dictator, which was bad because all dictators are bad and I should have freedom. And then as I grew up and switched a little, I sort of started moving from red to blue in my own personal ethics. I began to realize that the Democratic Party largely isn't a very benevolent dictator. There are these ideals.
Well, they're just chasing the Republicans. They're not coming, there's no vision. There's no democratic vision. Like the New Deal was like, okay, we're all screwed. Let's unplug and plug back in.
Benevolent dictatorship.
And that was kind of like the Democrats of the New Deal were kind of a benevolent dictatorship.
We're going to force the country to do what's good for itself.
We're going to do the thing. And then we enjoyed that for a while. And it got us out of a slump. But we're not doing that anymore. There's no actual vision coming from either party, Democrat or Republican, unfortunately. So that's why I'm talking about the idea of the benevolent dictator in a new context, not the old colonial context. So I looked up benevolent dictators.
Okay.
Came up with a guy, Lee Kuan Yew.
Uh-oh.
Since its independence in 1965, so this is a recent thing.
Hong Kong.
Singapore.
Oh.
In just a few decades, has transformed from a relatively underdeveloped and impoverished agrarian society to Asia's most developed nation and one of the wealthiest, as a center of aviation, international banking, business, tourism, and shipping. Singapore has thus been dubbed as one of the 4 Asian tigers. Lee Kuan Yew and his administration wielded absolute reign over Singaporean politics until 1990, while his People's Action Party has remained in power ever since, controlling Singapore as a dominant party state. Lee is therefore often called a benevolent dictator, as a leader who was in power for 31 years from 1959 to 1990. He implemented some laws that were deemed to be autocratic and attempting to dismantle political opposition. Despite this, he is reportedly often looked upon favorably by Singaporeans for his transformation of Singapore. Peter,
so because his authoritative because him telling people what to do turned out well. Right. It was okay.
Well, this is what they're saying.
That's the problem, though. If you want to try and enact that kind of system, you have to actually do it before you know whether it's going to work.
Right. Peter Popham of The Independent called Lee one of the most successful political pragmatists. Ever since Lee's resignation as prime minister in 1990 and his death in 2015, Singapore has undergone democratization with improved rule of law. Despite this, the government of Singapore is still being criticized by other political parties for not allowing complete and unrestricted freedom of speech. So that's the problem. There's no freedom of speech in Singapore.
Uh-oh.
Well, there's no freedom of speech here anymore either.
Right.
Because freedom of speech is that feather on hemp note of the Constitution.
I don't know what feather on hemp means.
They were using the quill pen and wrote on the Constitution on hemp paper. They said basically we should be able to say whatever the fuck we want, and even if I don't agree with you, you should still be able to say it. Yeah. Right? So that was written on paper.
Yeah.
But we don't operate on paper anymore. We operate on terms of service agreements.
Yeah.
And terms of service agreements do not have the First Amendment.
Right.
They can kick you off if you violate the TOS of whatever platform you're working on.
Right. Or even if you go and set up a soapbox on a city corner free of social media platforms or the internet in general, the city can still, if someone doesn't like what you're saying, they can go and appeal to the city to come and take you away for loitering. So we have a lot of institutions in place where you will face the consequences of your freedom of speech. It's not,
Since the turn of the century, I noticed whenever there were some protest, be it political, environmental, whatever, they started creating free speech zones, which was supposed to be the United States, right? That was supposed to be the free speech zone.
There was a free speech zone at the last Folk Fest before the coronavirus.
Yeah, so you just go over here around the corner where nobody can see you, and you can say whatever you want. Yeah. Welcome to America. So
we should set up camp in the free speech zone next Folk Fest.
Quill on paper says we have it.
Yeah.
Your terms of service that you don't read and agree to says we don't have it. So America says we have it, but we're not operating in America anymore. America is a fiction that we don't operate in anymore. Democracy is a fiction that we still pretend we operate in, but it's not functioning and has not been functioning at least since 1981.
Well,
at least.
At least.
According to the smart guys at the college.
Right.
So I want to explore the idea of the benevolent. How would a benevolent dictator look in today's world? We deal with, I think people really wanted Bernie Sanders because he was talking about the income inequality. He was talking about the fact that politicians are not listening to us anymore. They're listening to the donor class. They're not listening to the voting populace. So Bernie Sanders got famous. I mean, he's been around forever, but he didn't get super popular until he started saying things like this. This is a Bernie Sanders tweet. Federal minimum wage in 2009, $7.25 an hour. Federal minimum wage in 2020, $7.25 an hour. Total wealth of U.S. billionaires in 2009, $1.27 trillion. Total wealth of U.S. billionaires in 2020, $3.63 trillion.
That number, you might be thinking, oh, so that's like 3 times what it was. You cannot conceptualize it.
It's not conceptualized.
You cannot I also cannot conceptualize trillions of dollars. It's millions of millions of millions of millions of dollars. It's numbers in the cloud that people have, that they have power with, while other people in the country can't pay rent.
Let's make it a little more accessible. A wealth of Elon Musk on March 18th, 2020.
March 2000, that was just last year.
March 18th, 2020. His wealth was $24.5 billion.
Okay.
Wealth of Elon Musk on January 9th, 2021.
So less than 12 months later.
$209 billion.
Wait, so
he went from 24 to 209 billion.
8 times more.
Yeah. So,
billions of dollars.
So the point is we don't have people representing us to help us keep pace. So what's happening is the destruction of the middle class, wherever that is. I don't know where it is anymore. The destruction of the middle class.
A lot of people think they're middle class that really aren't.
You have nesting yacht rich folk, and then you have everybody else who's just going along with the baubles, who gets the shiny beads of technology, and they somehow eat, and they're just fine with that because they've given up voting, because a minority of us vote now.
A minority of the country.
Because it's shown to not matter on the national scale.
Yeah.
We can talk differently on the local scale.
Local and state elections are slightly different, and you have slightly more influence.
Unless it's a really important issue.
And then you don't.
And then unlimited political bribery comes in and makes sure you don't have a voice. So city council meetings, deciding whether you want your town to celebrate Gay Pride Month or something like that. Yeah, you can probably have some influence there.
Yeah, totally. And what Jennifer Lawrence says in the Represent Us video, which you can find just by YouTubing Jennifer Lawrence Represent Us, is that, not to be downhearted, we cannot enact change on a federal level right now with our votes currently because of gerrymandering, unlimited political bribery, and our voting structure. Unfortunately, we don't have ranked choice voting. But she said, but we can, over time, much like the Civil Rights Movement and the LGBTQ plus rights movement, Marriage Equality Act, we can enact change slowly over time by enacting change on the local and the state level. And it has been shown that when something changes, like 60% of change around the country at the local and state level, it pushes it over into the federal level. It becomes so much of a populist opinion that the powers that be cannot keep turning down the public's vote for that thing.
So that would be, if we are going to live in a democracy, we need to change things from the grassroots up and start with where your vote really does count. When you're unfriending your uncle because he voted for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, that really is only fueling the divide that keeps us from having some kind of compassion for our fellow citizens, which is so I don't see.
You cannot have compassion for someone if you do not understand their experience.
Right, and we're not talking about people's experiences. We're just continuing to divide and polarize. So that's where the idea of the benevolent dictator comes in. For me, in terms of like, I don't know how we get out of this. I think the World Economic Forum is posing to be the benevolent dictator. The Great Reset is a vision and a proposal that they will manage the world because the governments can't do it anymore. That's what the World Economic Forum is saying. They are proposing to be our benevolent dictator on a global level, because I don't know if you can I don't think you could do what the guy in Singapore did. I don't think you can take over a country.
Globally.
Well, World Economic Forum is doing it globally.
Right.
But I don't think you can take over a country and be a benevolent dictator because the CIA is too powerful.
Yeah.
And not just the CIA, all the other agents of the oligarchs.
Dot Connector brings up a good point that will be applicable when we talk about cryptocurrency and going post-orthodox on economics and finance. They say the elite wealth is not including the wealth that they hide in trusts. The elite establish control and then profit from it.
Yeah, people say that probably Vladimir Putin's the richest guy on the planet, really.
Yeah, but we just don't know it.
He doesn't pose for Forbes magazine.
Right.
He doesn't care if you know he's rich. Why should he care that you know?
It's the biggest land mass. It's don't they have the highest
They're
population?
an oligarchy, and he's in the government, and all the richest people, in order to play, must pay.
Must pay to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's the guy that gets paid.
Kevin Noel Olson says that we need a benevolent, artificially intelligent robot like Mechagodzilla.
Oh, I'm sure that'll work out fine.
Where can we buy one?
I'm sure that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Once AI takes over, everything will be fine. Yeah. So I think we're lacking vision as a people, and until we get a vision, I'm really disappointed in my fellow citizens that really think voting in the national election is going to do one iota of change for them, other than changing a player on the stage that causes your amygdala to do one thing or another. So we talked about on one of our road shows the idea of our lack of vision. We don't have vision in the country, and with no vision, we get mired in things like the pandemic narrative, because we're not like, how do we get through this to continue what we were doing? We don't know what we're doing as a society. We don't know what we're doing. We're just waiting for the new iPhone, basically. There's no vision for the nation because we're divided.
Well, and we also have some fights. We have some fights going on. We're fighting for human rights. I mean, there are various fights for human rights in various spheres. There's fights for human rights in the LGBTQ plus sphere.
Yeah.
There's fights for human rights in the environmental sphere or in the racial sphere. But those things are not a vision. That's still trying to clean up the shit of the last 200 years. That's trying to clean up past fuckery. And we should absolutely be doing that. But that's not like, and then what will we do? Why are we trying to do, like, what is the vision? What are we working towards?
Right.
What is better than just not that guy?
Yeah, we're not there yet. So I think that's one of the things we're going to be focusing on. For me, that's my interest for this season, is trying to find some kind of vision.
Vision.
Somebody must have some vision of how to move forward with an idea versus just constantly reacting to the trauma of the day, the prescribed distraction of the day, the dogfight of the day. Hey, look, that guy's trying to steal your bread. Distraction that is orchestrated by the oligarchs.
Right.
And I know people, oh, conspiracy, oh, secret people behind that. It's not secret.
It's not secret.
Go to the World Economic Forum, become a member.
Yeah, you can do that.
Sign up for their tweets, and you will see who has a vision for the world.
Yeah.
It's
and
a bunch of rich guys,
to do it.
and they have the power to do it.
And
so is there a shot for another benevolent dictator to come in?
Or should we just sort of jump on that train and hope we can influence it at some point down the tracks?
I don't know. That's the question I keep asking myself.
Maybe we'll be the people that like slowly wiggles the little pin out that like lets a bunch of train cars go down into the, I don't know.
So yeah, what would a benevolent dictator look like to you?
Oh.
What person could come up and say, I'm actually talking about the folks.
Right.
We're working on the folks issues.
The definition of vision is the ability to think about or plan the future. Not plan for the future, plan the future.
The future.
As in, there would be no society without you. You are society. I am society. We're not experiencing society. We are creating society and experiencing the society that our fellow society members are creating. Vision is the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom.
Yeah, I think we're suffering a critical failure of imagination.
Chef Boyardee says Lacey has the idea of having an empathetic council running the planet could work well.
Yeah.
Every single futuristic movie you've ever seen, every single alt reality or fantasy film, there's someone running things with a council. It's like 7 to 13 beings in long gray gowns doing a council.
So what if the proletariat pooled their money into Bitcoin and became more powerful than the World Economic Forum?
Didn't that just happen? Like a couple weeks ago, there was this whole uprising where
GameStop?
a bunch of Redditors caused something to crash.
GameStop.
Yeah, they were like, fuck you, we're in control now.
Yeah. I mean, it can happen. It takes coordination and it takes vision. And the vision is not going to be the quill on paper vision. It's going to be it's going to be the likes of people like Barrett Brown. It's going to be the likes of these guys that helped forge the new terrain that we are now negotiating and signing terms of service agreement on.
It's not this thing and then trickle down to everybody else. No. It's going to be a bunch of individual nodes connecting like a brain, like neurons in the brain. We're in a completely different reality. Like a couple generations ago and previous, it was like a tree with authority and then trickle down, or like the person that has and the people that have not. And now we're in a social realm. We really need to find that guy that did that bit, the speech about how society is restructured. And you used to give a kid a toy and tell them to take care of this because it is yours. Now parents are giving kids a toy and telling them, take care of this because when you're done with it, we'll give it to somebody else who wants it. That's a complete mental shift from the way that half the people on the planet who are still alive think, and half the people on the planet who are alive are now thinking in this more socially connected, nodular, everybody on the same level, kind of anarchic way of making things happen.
Speaking of trickle down, you want to talk about the Colonial Pipeline leak?
Okay, but we only have 15 minutes.
I just want to do a quick...
Do you want to do it now, or do you want to like do another show in the morning and talk about it?
I just want to do a quick update.
Okay.
Because I know some people have been following that story since we started talking about it, since we were first alerted to it by our colleague...
at KTUH.
eOmni at KTUH in Honolulu. Impacts of the 2020 Colonial Pipeline rupture continue to grow. This is from Frack Tracker. Frack Tracker. It's like fact checker, but it's for fracking.
That's hard to say.
I know, but I just put a link in our thing, but it's FRACTRACKER.
Okay.
And there's an article. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from this little article about, quick, if you don't know, the Colonial Pipeline that you know all about the hack because it's been in the news over and over and over.
What is it that you know about the Colonial Pipeline?
The hack. So the leak, which is really interesting because when you talk about the hack, if you search Colonial Pipeline leak, they talk about information being leaked in the hack.
Oh my God.
Information might be leaked in the hack.
Well,
but
that must be the leak they're talking about.
If you take your search settings before the hack and you find an actual leak, that at this point is underestimated at 1.2 million gallons of gasoline leaked into a wildlife preserve in North Carolina, and that estimate is too low, according to the people who gave us the estimate, who have continued to give us astronomically too low. Is that right? Inversely, -0, astronomically too low estimates.
Yes.
They don't know how deep it's gone, and they don't know how much is leaked, and they keep petitioning. In other words, what they're saying is like, we're not going to tell you yet. So the DEQ is like, you need to give us an update on what's going on. They're like, yeah, we're not doing that yet.
But we won't.
Let's
but
talk
we're not
about
going to.
Let's talk about the other leak that the hackers did.
Yes.
Anyway,
leaking information.
So this is some up-to-date information on the Colonial Pipeline fuel leak, or as they say, free product event.
Displaced product.
Displaced product event, yes. By far, the spill last August was the largest single gasoline spill nationwide since 2000 and the second largest in the history of anybody taking notes. For comparison, between 2000 and 2019, the amount of gasoline spillage by all companies in 2,571 spills was 14.8 million gallons. During that period of time, Colonial was responsible for 272 of those spills, with a loss of 628,000 gallons.
So probably over 2/3 of the oil or gasoline lost has been Colonial Pipeline itself.
Well, not 2/3. 14.8 million gallons have been spilled. 272 of those spills are theirs, totaling less than 1 million.
Oh.
This one spill
Oh.
is more than all those 272 other spills by Colonial. And they
I
haven't
thought
even,
there was a 9 million in there somewhere.
no, they haven't even got the number right
Oh,
yet.
okay.
The cost of cleanup of spills incurred by Colonial was 168.8 million. That does not include this one.
All the other spills, that's how much it cost Colonial to clean them up?
168.
Okay,
And they probably didn't finish the cleanup. You know how this stuff goes.
right.
According to North Carolina Policy Watch, over time, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration has collected a mere $448,000 from Colonial for its spills. This is despite a civil penalty of $34 million assessed to Colonial by the EPA, as well as $606,000 in fines that the FERC has assessed toward Colonial since 1993. None of this includes the current spill. Think
about what the EPA could do with $34 million.
They've only paid under half a million of 34 million in fines.
What?
And I guess they can just be perpetually late. This is what we talk about.
we
This is
just
what we're
haven't
talking
paid it
about
yet.
when we're talking about oligarchs.
Yeah, these are oligarchs.
This is an oligarch.
The government says do this thing, and they're like, meh.
Yeah. So
That's an oligarch. That's the person actually running the country.
So getting current, by April 12th, 2021, Colonial asserted that it had recovered 24,512 barrels, which is 1 million gallons.
Of product?
Of what they think were 28,571 barrels, 1.2 million gallons, of fuel that leaked onto the site. They say that the volume recovered is approximately 85% of what was spilled, and consider the remediation plan is working as designed. To aid in the remediation process, Colonial has also purchased 3 properties across the road from the spill site. They are using a combination of 56 recovery wells, 84 monitoring wells, and 140 in total, and expect to remain on the site for years as its wells continue to withdraw gasoline.
So that's at the Ore Nature Reserve.
Yeah.
And Dark and I rolled up to it.
Yeah.
Which you can see in one of our previous videos. We went and talked to
We'll
them.
get to that.
Yeah.
In 2015 interview, former president... Oh, wait, that's another thing. All right, so yes, we rolled up to the site of the nature preserve with our camera rolling to see what was going on, because we drove through Huntersville, North Carolina. I Googled Colonial Pipeline spill today, and all I found under that hashtag on Twitter were mostly talking about their spill from 2016, which was like 300 some odd thousand gallons and a horrible ecological disaster. But there was one quote where I found where somebody took a picture of that spot where we
pulled over
to interview or to just look.
We were just like, look at all of these trucks and barriers at the nature preserve.
So somebody hashtagged Colonial Pipeline leak and says now there was a cop parked there every day, all day long. So if we drove by there and we tried to pull in, we would not be able to now because there is a police officer sitting in the only spot where you can pull over.
Right. To see what's happening.
And that happened just a couple of days after we pulled over to try to do some journalism.
It makes me feel a tiny bit important, but I'm sure we weren't I would hope we were not the only people in the whole country who was pulling over to be like, why is this this public access nature preserve shut down? And what are all these trucks doing? And how long are you going to be here? And now he's saying, the guy that talked to us on the video is like, oh, this is private property now. And I'm like, excuse me, the nature preserve?
I thought it was a nature preserve. He goes, it's a nature preserve.
Oh yeah, it's public.
But it's also
But you can't go
private.
to it.
It's public-private. We're oligarchs. Shut up. Get out of here.
Yeah, shut up, get out of here. Now we have a cop.
And he's just some guy. He's just some guy who has a job.
He was just some guy. And now he's like, I don't want to have to do that again. That was really annoying. So now let's get a cop.
Let's get a cop.
Yeah.
And so now you have the police protecting
the oligarchs.
The oligarchs.
From
how it works.
People who might be wondering when
What's
they're going to be able
on?
to get back into the nature preserve by their house.
Cannot.
For years.
We're going to go deeper into the nature preserve because I have a feeling that the reason it's a nature preserve is because they put the pipeline there, and that way nobody can build around it or endanger the pipeline. So we'll just call it a nature preserve. I don't know if that's true.
How does a pipeline get built through a nature preserve?
It doesn't. I think you
So
build a
they added
pipeline and then you call it a nature preserve. I think that's what happened.
Only little families
I don't
with
know
dogs.
yet, but I think that's what happened. We also we did a live broadcast from the nature preserve, the private property where the free product is just roaming around free in the nature preserve, unencumbered. And we do have a friend of the show that gave us some really interesting information, being somebody who works on pipelines. And I don't know if we're going to have time to get to that on this show. I want to keep doing updates on the Colonial Pipeline because I think it's one of the bigger stories if you care about environmental issues. I think it's one of the bigger stories that's going on right now.
That's going on and nobody knows about it.
That people don't talk about.
Like the only station that we've been able to, the biggest station we've been able to find that's talking about it is WCNC, which is a Fox News station in North Carolina. So there is some statewide stories being talked about just in North Carolina on the Fox station. But other than that, we haven't been able to find any news articles by any major station talking about this massive leak.
Yeah, on Monday, I think I want to talk a little bit about the Fauci emails. I just started looking into it. I woke up this morning and my various...
Oh, now it's Fauci's emails?
Right.
His emails!
And so I decided to look up because I saw these people talking about Fauci in the emails. So I decided to look up Fauci emails. And the first suggestion is Fauci emails Fox.
Interesting.
So I took Fox off.
Yeah.
And just looked Fauci emails. So there was CNN, MSNBC, NPR, BBC, and then a ton of Fox. And so I looked up Fox, and they're saying he knew it came from Wuhan, blah, 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 right? I looked at the NPR story, and the NPR story is like, he promptly answers his emails. One old lady was concerned about this, and he responded to her, and he's kind of an affable guy. I was like, what is going on?
It's not about the... Yeah, okay, all right.
So there was nothing critical of Fauci in the NPR story. It
wasn't actually about the controversial emails.
No. And I think the way it's being framed is, I think it's a little bit deceptive because I haven't read all 10,000 emails that were released.
Right.
And he also knows they were released because it was a Freedom of Information Act. These are all public emails. These are emails that he was sending to the public. As a job, he knew that was going to be public record. There were emails where they're like, hey, this thing in Wuhan, and he's like, call me, right? He didn't continue that dialogue in email. So I can understand why there's some skepticism around Fauci and his story, especially since he makes money off of the medical industry,
right,
outside of his position with the National Institute of Health. There's some funny inside stuff going on with Fauci that I don't feel super comfortable with, but I'm also not a Republican, so how can I even be a person? So I want to look more into the Fauci thing because I think the Fox perspective on Fauci is over the top and ridiculous. I think that the NPR and the CNN and the MSNBC is underwhelmingly uncritical. And I think somewhere in between is a post-Orthodox perspective that hopefully I'll come up with by Monday. Are we through talking?
Do you want to be through talking? I'm just slowly sharing this video where everybody can see like the awkward moment where like we rolled up to the pipeline leak location and the guy had to like trottle across the street and be like, you can't be parking here. Yeah,
it was a small moment, but we didn't.
I was very triggered. I was like, I should not be doing this. This is stupid.
Did you show the other video?
Post
the other video where we talked for an hour about that 10-minute video.
You can find that on Facebook.
Yeah, you can find that on the Post-Orthodoxy. If you're not on the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page, you might want to go there and be our friend.
Yeah.
Like it, and then you can find out these things as they happen.
Dot Connector, subscribe to us on YouTube. I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
I subscribe back. They have, let me see, what are their videos? They have 3 videos in their account. How we are controlled, the law and banking system, toxins cause illnesses and how I removed them, and a video about germ versus terrain theory of illness.
Well,
all from the last few months.
Dot Collector. Well, let's like his page and go
We'll
check it
out
out.
Your content for sure.
Maybe there's something there that we can use on the show.
And if y'all have a moment and a spare lying around in your closet,
do you have any extra ones?
And you like us on YouTube, it would really help because that's the last bastion of places where I can't just be like youtube.com/post-orthodoxy, because you can only have a custom channel URL once you have 100 subscribers.
So we need a few more people on our
it won't
page.
Cost you nothing. You don't have to get any emails.
If you're watching us on Twitch
Yeah.
and you're watching us on Facebook, would you mind please going to the YouTube page and liking our page?
That's right.
So, we just went to North Carolina because we were driving through, and we stopped briefly. And I think it's really interesting that now there is a cop posted exactly where we stopped, 24 hours a day.
Fascinating.
That wasn't there before we were there.
Right.
And we weren't even all that controversial. We just said,
What's going
on? And that was too much.
And didn't leave right away.
So we would like to become the kind of organization that is viewer supported, because I have a problem with corporate funded media. I don't like, that whole "you are what you eat" thing. I think really needs to apply to your information content now. If you don't know where the information is coming from, I think there's all kinds of toxic chemicals in your information, depending on who's funding that information and what they want you to think. So we would like to be supported as independent journalists, and we might have gotten in trouble a little more in North Carolina if we had some money behind us.
If you want to see us
get in trouble,
stay tuned, because we'll be launching our website soon, and for the price of 1 monthly coffee, you can encourage us to go get into more trouble that you can watch online. Yeah,
thanks for sticking through the technical difficulties at the beginning of the show. And we'll be back on Monday.
We're back, bitches.
If not before.
Yeah, if not before.
That
we might
could happen
get inspired.
at any moment.
Yeah, but we will definitely be back on Monday to discuss our experiences in and around the LGBTQ+ community, both of us having grown up conservative Christian type people. And then our special guest on Thursday will be Samantha Brown, who has seen some shit.
Yeah, she was at the Stonewall Uprising in New York.
So if you want to hear that interview,
been around.
Click on all the bells that, that let you know when we're online. You know what I'm saying. Mercurius RX just subscribed to us.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, we'll talk to you guys soon. Have a great weekend.
Cheers and aloha.